All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the first TI-89 stats list editor tutorial video. What I'm going to do in this video is show you any and all TI-89 stats app tricks that are relevant for chapter 1, the basics of this course. So what I'm going to do is work through examples that you've already seen. That way you can confirm that the results from the calculator are correct. I am starting on page 8 of the chapter 1 notes. I'm looking at this data set from McDonald's, fat content of various sandwiches. We already calculated means for that, but I'm going to show you how to find mean, standard deviation, and some other things as well. So the idea is once you're into your stats app, we want to input all these values from our sample, these quantitative values, into one of the lists in the calculator itself. There are a total of, I want to say 6 lists in here, and then some possible extraneous things that the calculator generates for various procedures that you do. But we're not going to worry about that yet. We typically only use lists 1, 2, and maybe 3. So I'm just going to use list 1. If you already have older data stored in a list and you want to clear it, you can do that by highlighting the name of the list itself. I did that by just scrolling up with my arrow, and then I hit the clear button. When you first hit clear, it doesn't look like anything has happened, but trust me, when you scroll back down, you have an empty list. I'm going to go ahead and clear list 2 as well, just to start fresh here. And inputting into a list is pretty easy. As you can see, the dark highlighted region that I'm moving around with the arrows, when you have it in the interior of a particular list, you just start typing. I'm putting in the number 9, and then I hit enter, followed by 12, 23. I'm just going right down the list here. You obviously want to be really careful because a single mistake and a single entry here will possibly change all the relevant values that you're looking for. A mean is going to be different. Standard deviation may be different. So I want to do this very, very carefully. In fact, I'm a little nervous because I tend to make mistakes when I talk and type at the same time. So let's just run through the list and double check. 40, 39, 39, 19, 26, 28, 9. All right, it looks like we're good to go. All right, so what can I do now that I've got my data in the calculator here? So all these function buttons, F1 through F7, we see referenced up at the top of the stats app. Those are various things we're going to use. We don't tend to use F1 very often. F2 is for graphing. We'll get to that in a moment. F3 allows you to perform some very basic operations on your list. For example, sometimes we want to see numbers in order if we're trying to group them into categories. So, oops, that's not the button I wanted. Excuse me. If I highlight OPS for operations, I can either hit enter or arrow to the right. It'll open up this submenu and then sort list. I'll go ahead and choose that. We do have to tell the calculator which list we want to sort. Right now it's defaulting to list 1. I'm going to clear that just because I want to show you how to input the proper name of a list. There's 2 ways to do it. There's a quick way and there's a not so quick way. I could manually use the alpha button, start typing in the word list1. If I hit alpha 4, for example, I get an L, but that tends to be somewhat tedious. The quicker way to do it, if you just hit second and then the minus sign takes you to a variable menu. It basically showing you everything that's stored in your calculator. And for me, at least, usually near the top, I see the various lists. So I can just highlight list 1 and hit enter. And I scroll down, an arrow over. I can choose between ascending or descending, depending on what order you want. Hit enter. And now it's the very same numbers as before, but they've been ordered. So if you were going to make a histogram by hand and you wanted to group these numbers from, let's say, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, and so on, you could very easily do that now that these are in order. Moving over to F4, the calculation menu. Just taking a quick peek in here. I'm trying to think ahead of what in here you're gonna have to know how to do. Eventually, we'll use regressions, but not in this video. The ones below that, we don't tend to use too much. It's the one variable stats is the most popular option when you come in here. This is the one that's relevant for chapter 1, basic statistics. So one variable stats, hit enter. And again, the calculator wants to know which list we're gonna do operations on. I see something in there right now that I'm not interested in, so I'm gonna clear it. Second minus, find list 1, there it is. Frequency and category, you typically aren't gonna worry about that. In fact, I'm not gonna worry about any of these other options. I'm just gonna hit enter, give the calculator a moment. And now we have a bunch of goodies that have popped up. You'll notice a little arrow on the left signifying that I could scroll down and see some more stuff below. I'm going to scroll back up, start at the top. And some of these things, it should be pretty obvious what they are. So for example, X bar 26.2, that does in fact match the value we found when we first went through the notes. That is the average of a sample. Okay, it's the average of our particular sample. Sigma X right below that is the sum of all your values. That's not something we typically need to look at, but it's there if you want it. Sum of the squares of the values, we don't look at that in this course. Below that, we see 2 standard deviations, SX and lowercase sigma x. Which one do you want to be using? Well, it depends. If we did in fact input a sample from a larger population, we would want SX. It is a sample standard deviation. It's an estimate of a true population deviation. That's the one that we probably use more often. However, if you have a scenario where you are in fact able to input an entire population's worth of data into your TI-89, it's not very likely, but if you had a small population, it's possible. If that was the case, you would want to look at this second value. This is the calculation assuming you've inputted an entire population. Below that, we see the sample size of 15. Below that, let me scroll just a bit. You've got your 5-number summary: minimum, quartile 1, median, Q3, quartile 3, and then the maximum. So that's kind of nice that those are all generated for you, just if you're willing to type your data into the calculator. Below that, we see a sum of squared deviations. This is a value you might use if you were in the process of trying to calculate standard deviation the long way, although...
Good morning, staff and students. This is Mrs. Basia with a few reminders for today.
Just going to wait for this
please make sure that
SAT
one of your
announcement
rosters
here.
are brought down to room 112, indicating who is present and who is...
Okay, I think I was able to successfully pause the video there. If not, well, then you had to sit through a couple-minute announcement, no big deal. But yeah, what I was saying is it's kind of silly for us to use this last value in the one variable stats, because usually what we use it for is to find a standard deviation, but that standard deviation is already in this list, so you probably will never use this value. So the most important things to be able to get out of here are the 5-number summary, the relevant standard deviation depending on your scenario, and then of course the X bar at the very top. All right, I'm gonna hit enter. That stuff goes away. If you feel like, oh no, I wanted to see it again, where did it go? Do I have to retype everything? The answer is probably not, because if I go back to F4 and just choose show stats, I believe it shows you the most recent stats that you've looked at. Okay. For chapter 1, that's about as much as you need to know. We don't get into the F5, F6, F7. We'll save that for other videos. But really quickly, I will show you how to do some basic graphs. F2, if I open that up, there is an option called plot setup. This allows you to set up some graphs. And when you open that up, it takes you to a dialog window that lists out all the plots that are possible in your calculator and whether or not there's something currently stored in them. Right now, plots 4 through 9 are empty. I do have some stuff in plots 1, 2, and 3. If I want to clear some stuff that I don't need anymore, I can just highlight the relevant plot and go with F3. Clears it out, clear it out, clear it out. And I'll make a new plot. To do that, highlight the plot name that you want. Choose F1 to define it, first option there is plot type. If we're going with one variable data, we wouldn't want a scatter plot. What would we want? Well, possibly a box plot. I'm gonna not show histogram because it's actually somewhat tricky to get the histogram to match the settings you want as far as bin width and scaling and all that. It's generally quicker to just make one by hand than to try and get it right in the calculator. So I'm not even gonna mess with that. So for one variable data, what we typically use is modified box plot. I need to use this modified version rather than the regular box plot because I want to see outliers if they exist. Modified box plot will show me outliers as a separate dot on the plot. A normal box plot won't do that. So always go with mod box plot. Underneath that, where it says mark, you get to decide what outliers show up as. I tend not to use dots because they're a little hard to see, but it's really up to you. I'm just going to leave it at box. Below that in the X cell, again, you need to tell the calculator which list we want to make a box plot for. So I'll go second minus, find list 1 again. There it is. Just about everything else here is grayed out. We don't really need it. I'm not going to mess with frequencies. I'm going to just hit enter. And now my plot is defined. I see a little baby box plot here in plot 1. I also have a check mark next to plot 1, which means when I attempt to make the graph show up, the calculator will try to show us this one. If you have a number of different plots in here and you don't want to erase them, but you don't necessarily want to see them all at the same time, you can toggle certain plots on and off using F4. I could turn off plot 1. Well, I'll turn it right back on though. To see the actual graph, you eventually have to hit F5, zoom data. This will zoom the graph on your calculator to fit whatever plots you have selected. So I'll go F5, and we do see a box plot. What's nice here is if you go with F3, this trace feature, and then hit left and right, it will show you relevant locations on that box plot. I see minimum of 9, Q1 of 19, and so on. I'm gonna go back to my data and I'm gonna make up another data point just because I would like to show you the outliers. So I'll throw in a 100 here. And now I'm gonna go back to F2, plot setup. I guess I don't even think I really needed to go back here. But I'll hit F5 as long as I'm in there anyway. And you'll see that now I have this box way out off to the side. It's automatically adjusted the scale to include it. If I go with trace again, F3, I can even get out there and see what the outliers are. So that's just what an outlier looks like with my particular settings. All right, I believe that's it for chapter 1 stuff. So stay tuned for further videos to learn some other tricks that become relevant later on in the course. Thanks.